2024 was a historic disaster for the Panthers defense. 2025 has been a big bounce back, but what grade are they deserving heading into this bye week? I'll tell you right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and yes, of course, Friday, your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for watching the show right here on YouTube and listening wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Panthers is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. Back here on a Friday where the Panthers are not active during week 14 of the NFL season. It finally came the bye week, and one that they absolutely needed to have, as they've had injuries across the offensive line all season long, and they were missing guys like Tre'von Moehrig, albeit due to suspension on Sunday in that upset winning against the Rams, and also missing Jaycee, who will be back next Sunday down in New Orleans. So an excellent time for them sitting at 7-6, a half game out of first place in the NFC South to get a little R&R this week and get back and ready to go for those 4 games to finish out the season where they could potentially be NFC South division champs for the first time since 2015. But yesterday on the show, I gave you my grades looking at the offense, quarterback, running back, tight end, wide receiver, offensive line, every single position on the offense, gave out those marks yesterday. Today, let's take a look at the defense. We're talking defensive tackles, talking to edge rushers, talking about safeties, corners, linebackers, every single piece of the defense. So let's go ahead and start off by looking at the defensive tackle grades. The Panthers last year could not stop the run. Over 3,000 yards they allowed on the ground. That does not happen if Derrick Brown does not tear his meniscus week 1 against the Saints. I think that's pretty fair to say. Maybe they're not a great run-stopping team, but they're not historically the worst in franchise history and one of the worst in the NFL if they have Derrick Brown. And what do you know, this season, having DB back makes a world of difference for Carolina. He has 45 tackles this season and a career-high 4 sacks, something that Todd Wash, the defensive line coach, said he wanted to do here in Carolina a couple years ago. That has finally happened with Derrick Brown, getting to that point where he is a guy who can actually rush the passer and get him down on the ground as well. Like, he's been so good in that department this year. And I look at it, I don't really see what he doesn't do. That's excellent. You go back to Sunday, he gets his mid up there, tips the ball. It's intercepted by Nick Scott, preventing points going on the board for the Rams. And he closes out the game with the strip sack, which I believe was the biggest moment of his Panthers career. And there have not been a lot of moments where you look at it and say, oh man, Derrick really changed the fortunes of the franchise. On Sunday, 10.5-point home dogs going up against the Super Bowl favorites, the MVP favorite at that time in Matthew Stafford, and you make those 2 monstrous plays. It's not like the Panthers defense really stopped the Rams from getting up and down the field. They had 8 true possessions, and they punted 1 time all day. It was the 3 turnovers and 2 of those that were created by Derrick Brown that were the difference as Carolina got that huge upset win. You look at PFF, and we're going to talk a lot about the PFF grades today, because defensively, when looking at True Media, they don't always have a lot of defensive stats like they have offensively, because the NFL and football in general has become an offensive game. So it's kind of annoying that I got to lean on this, but also I'm going to lean on what I've seen and my own opinions as well. But PFF has graded Derrick as the 11th best interior defensive lineman in the NFL so far out of 129 guys. Ashawn Robinson as well has been really good. And he feels like, to me, the lost man heading into the season. We talked a lot about Derrick Brown coming back. We talked about Turk Wharton and Bobby Brown III coming in from Kansas City and LA, and the potential that those guys could be high impact players, as they were clearly priority free agents for Carolina and must adds after what we saw last year when Derrick went out. It was just Ashawn. Deshaun Williams, LeBron Ray, anybody else, Nick Thurman, who stepped up in there. They weren't good. The Panthers had one of the worst, if not the worst, defensive line in football last year. And Ashawn didn't grade out well when you look at the season, I think in large part because of what was around him. But I thought he had a good season, considering all the factors that played into how poorly Carolina played up front. He was not the problem. And so far this season, he's been good. He has 46 tackles so far, 3 sacks after having 4.5 or 5.5 rather last year. That was a career high. He has 2.5 tackles for loss. He's the 32nd rated interior defensive lineman according to PFF. So you have a top 11 guy in Derrick Brown, who I think is really a top 5 defensive tackle so far this season. Then you have someone who's right there in the top 32 as well in Ashawn, and those are your starting interior defensive linemen. That is solid for Carolina, because in years past, it was really just Derrick and whoever they could find. Now it's Derrick and Ashawn, who was a second-round pick coming out of Alabama, has plenty of experience in Detroit, in LA, and now here in his second year with Carolina. He has meant a lot to this team. So do not forget about what Ashawn Robinson has been able to do here. I felt like going into the season that if Bobby Brown and Turk Wharton could have the same impact that Damian Lewis and Robert Hunt had last year on the offensive line, this year with the defensive line, that the Panthers, like last year, would be dramatically improved up front. Now, obviously, Derrick Brown being a piece of that is important. So let's look at DB in a way that we look at Taylor Moton. Now, Derrick Brown, Taylor Moton, not the same level of player. I understand that. But as far as like the consistency, DB is that. Taylor Moton's that. You needed to find some other guys who could help elevate that room. And that was the hope when they brought in Turk and they brought in Bobby. Now, if you look at PFF, they're saying that neither one of them has been really good at all. They have Turk with a 40.8 PFF grade. They have Bobby with a 53.1. And maybe my eyes have deceived me because I haven't had any feeling that they've been bad this year. I think that Turk's actually been pretty solid. I think that Bobby has fit in nicely as well. I haven't sat there and looked at it as like, oh, these guys, they can't play. I haven't had that thought. That's not what I've seen. And when I said at the top of the show, we're going to go over a lot of PFF grades because there's not a lot of information out there, at least that I have access to, that's going to give me a good indication of who's playing well, who's not. I'm watching the games. I'm looking at the defensive line, and I'm seeing that they're not getting gashed every single week. I'm seeing that this is not a liability of a unit like it was last year in 2024 when Derrick wasn't out there. With Derrick now, with Ashawn, and then these two, I think that they've been solid. So the grades say they're not playing well. Y'all let me know what you think, because I don't think that Bobby or Turk have been bad players. I think that they have obviously been a positive. They've been an additive to what they've done so far this year. And you just look at the rushing defensive numbers, and it's a whole unit that goes into it. It's not just the interior defensive linemen. It's the edge rushers, it's the linebackers, it's the corners, it's the safeties. But looking at the first guys who really have to be able to hold things in the middle of this defense, because if you can't stop the run, you can't stop anything. Those aren't my words. Those are Jaycee Horn's words. They're allowing 4.5 yards per rush so far this season, which is bottom 10 in the NFL, but they gave it 5.2 last year. That was the worst in the league. Overall, the Panthers are just 26th in total rush EPA, but they're 18th in success rate against the run. Last year, they were dead last in each category. So while this may not still be a good rushing defense, this is a much better rushing defense that we have seen in years past. And then even recently, like, what games are you looking at where you felt like they didn't do a good job? Week 1 against Jacksonville, against the Bills. Other than that, the Rams, I guess on Sunday, they didn't do that well against the run, but they didn't. I don't think it was like a poor effort, but it wasn't their best, obviously. In the first half against Atlanta, in the weeks, a couple weeks ago against Ashawn Robinson, they struggled. But then in the second half, they basically pitched a shutout. And there was those weeks against Miami, against Dallas, against New York, where they were giving up nothing until they got gashed by Buffalo. I think they've been pretty good. So the advanced numbers and even the basic stats don't back that up as far as how Carolina's been able to stop the run. But looking at this defensive tackle unit overall, Derrick Brown was having a Pro Bowl season yet again. Ashawn Robinson, it has been really solid. And I do think they have gotten good impacts from both Turk Wharton and from Bobby Brown III. So I'm going to give the defensive tackle group a B right now when looking at their first 13 games this season in 2025. And they will be paramount to the success down the stretch here in his final 4 games of the year. Edge rushers came into the year with concerns about him, but was excited about the youth movement there. And now looking at it through 13 weeks, and it is not the best. We'll go over that here in just a moment on Locked on Panthers. NFL Sundays move fast, one big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift. A receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment. Live spreads and money lines adjust instantly. Player props update as guys heat up. You can bet next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, every possibility. And with the Panthers not playing this weekend, what a perfect Sunday to kick your feet up and bet over with FanDuel. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season and this Sunday, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. The Panthers' interior defensive line, after being a liability last year, has become a strength, in large part because Derrick Brown is back, but also the improved play of Ashawn Robinson, who is solid up front, and the additions of both Bobby Brown III and Turk Wharton. The edge rush group was not good last year, and I had concerns heading into the season, even though Carolina did the right thing. On night 2 of the draft, they used the second-round pick that they traded up for to select Nick Scourton out of Texas A&M. Then in the 3rd round, another trade. They selected Prince Umanmielen out of Ole Miss. It made sense. You had young guys that you need to bring in to be the future. Jadeveon Clowney was on the roster at that point in time, but he was never going to be the future here in Carolina. You had signed Patrick Jones II to come in for the next 2 seasons, but he was not necessarily that high-level kind of player who could be an impact player week in and week out based off what he had done in his career in Minnesota. DJ Wonnum had shown you some pass rushing juice at the end of last season after missing the first 9 games due to complications with a blood clot. But you needed to actually find some guys who could end up being your cornerstones on the edge moving forward. And I applaud Dan Morgan and Brant Tillis, the scouting department, Dave Canales, everybody involved in the organization for going out there and getting 2 very obvious picks there and first-team All-SEC players in Scourton and Umanmielen. But I told y'all back then, and as we continue to evaluate the group after they got rid of Clowney and looking at it, that it was going to take some time before Scourton and Umanmielen ended up being those high-level type of guys. And we have even seen recently over the last month or so that Nick Scourton's becoming a leader in that locker room, and he's becoming kind of a force off the edge, but he's not there yet. And Princely also is not there yet, and I did not think that was going to happen this year. Now, there's 4 games left, and I have been wrong plenty of times. Lord knows, y'all know. We'll see if that ticks up moving forward. But based off of the season, not a lot of evidence to suggest that this is going to be a group that dramatically improves as the Panthers are going on this 4-game hunt to get into the playoffs. And honestly, the numbers I'm going to go over, it is impressive that this team is sitting here at 7-6 and with an opportunity where if they win the right 3 games or win their final 4, they're division champs and they're going to the playoffs. It's remarkable they're even in this spot, considering that they have no pass rush at all. Awful. Now, San Francisco is ahead of them, and the Niners are in a position to go to the playoffs as well. So it's not necessarily a prerequisite, but if you want to be a Super Bowl title contender, like I guess the Broncos are, it's hard to argue at this point in time, you want to have a sick pass rush. Look at what the Eagles had last year and why they were able to beat Kansas City this time around. they got after Mahomes' ass in that Super Bowl. And Carolina has not really done that this year. They rank last in the NFL in PFF pressure percentage at 27.7%. That is atrocious. It's not good, man. It's not good. If you look at Pro Football Reference and their numbers, it's even lower. So I'm going to spare you whatever they're looking at there. We're just not going to go over those numbers. Panthers are 29th in sack percentage at 4.3% on opponent dropbacks, and they are tied for 30th with 18 sacks on the season. Looking at those 18 sacks, only 4.5 have come from the primary edge rushing group they have right now in Scourton and Umanmielen and DJ Wonnum. Nick has 3. Princely has 1.5. DJ has 0. Goose egg. They're paying him too much to be that veteran in that room, to get all these starts, to not give them anything off the edge. And based off of those numbers and the fact that he missed a lot of time last year, and I understand serious health scare there, that was the reason behind it. I can't imagine that past these next 4, potentially 5, 6, 7, 8 games, that he will be back in Carolina next season. Looking at the defensive tackles, though, they have 8.5. So that just gives you a nice inclination of just how little they're getting out of the edge rush group as far as just pressure percentage wise and sack wise. Oh, speaking of pressure percentage, Nick Scourton has a 9.2 pressure percentage. DJ Wonnum 8.1, which ranks 55th and 59th respectively among 61 qualifying outside linebackers per True Media. Princely did not qualify, but he has 8%. So 9.2, 8.1, 8% pressure percentage from the top 3 edge rushers here heading into the final 4 weeks. Not great. So for comparison's sake, Brian Burns, not this season, rookie Brian Burns had an 11.4% pressure percentage and a 7.5 sack rate. So he had 7.5 sacks that year. So unless Nick just goes off in the next 4 weeks, which is possible, neither he or Princely will match that total, which I think is fine. Brian was a guy picked in the middle of the first round, and Nick was taken late in the second, and then Princely was taken in the third. So they should not have the same expectations as rookies as a first-round pick will have. But moving forward, you're going to need more from them. But to their credit, they've actually been pretty good against the run this year, at least better than they were last year. Nick has a 64.5 run defense grade according to PFF. DJ has a 64.9. So I like to see that. Princely has not graded out well against the run, which not surprising. That was not necessarily what he was known for heading into the league, and that was going to be an area that he was going to have to improve upon. But from having conversations with him in the scrums in the locker room, the guy has a good head on his shoulder. He's really leaned on some of the vets in that locker room, and he understands, like, this is a job. He's got to work on his craft. I'm not worried about Princely at all. But so far, I hate to do this, but their jobs are, well, number one, in this defensive scheme to stop the run, and they're doing that for the most part, but it's also to get after the passer and not be contributing in that manner. I'm going to give him a D plus. I got to get, and I'll be nice. D plus. It hasn't been great. I didn't have a lot of expectations for it to be good this year as far as the pass rush and what they're going to get out of this unit. But they've had areas where they've looked good, and there's been moments this year, but overall it's been a below average outside linebacker group, which again, I don't think should have surprised anybody who's really paying attention heading into the season. Linebacker, Tre'von Wallace, Christian Roseboom, those have been the guys. The plan going into the season was for it to be Tre'von, Christian, and Josey Jewell, who we were told after Jewell was shockingly waived right before training camp back at the end of July, there's a possibility he could be back if he was able to get over his concussion symptoms that were bothering him from all the way back in December. So 7-8 months of him just dealing with that. God bless him. No update there on Josey Jewell. So I don't think that's going to happen. But Tre'von and Christian, they've had their ups and downs. Now with Tre'von Wallace, he started 8 games last year. And so far, I think he's missed 2 this year. So he's now finally played a full season as a starter in the NFL. We're basically in his second year looking at just starting reps and snaps in the NFL. So you got to give him a little bit of grace, which I'm going to do. He has a 55.3 PFF grade. Christian has a 51.0. So right there on the dot 51 PFF grade. Roseboom leads the team with 91 tackles. Wallace has 58. Meanwhile, and this is a conversation, I want to touch on this briefly. Shaq Thompson, he is the 6th highest graded linebacker according to PFF. And I've seen fans look at that and be like, oh, we should have had Shaq back here in Carolina and all this. Like, guys, y'all, come on. Did we forget? He played in 6 games the last 2 years. He had an awful broken leg on Monday night against the Saints back in week 2 of 2023. Then last year in the second half, he tore his Achilles. And that's also been a guy that has dogged the playing surface here and really called out the owner. I don't think David Tepper was going to be willing to want him to come back. And I get that Dan and Dave and Brandt have, full reins of the whole operation, but we can't kid ourselves and pretend that David Tepper is not still an active participant in this whole enterprise here in Carolina. So that may have played a role, but also mainly he was over 30. He has had 2 significant injuries, and one of them with the Achilles tear that you don't want to invest in anybody after that. He went to a place that made a lot of sense. It was going to be very obviously a winning football team. He knows the scheme, having been here with Sean McDermott before when he was a DC in Carolina. It's been a decade now, but still, it made sense that he could go there and have success. They already had Matt Milano, Bernard, and he's had injuries too. Shaq has only played in 8 games so far this season, so it's not like he's been healthy every single week, but it's also not like Roseboom and Tre'von been healthy. The plan was to have Roseboom, Tre'von, and Jaycee. It did not work out with Jaycee being healthy, and the linebackers injuries have plagued this team again this year, but not nearly as badly as it did last year when they didn't have Jaycee for a large portion of the season. Of course, lost Shaq after 4 weeks. So yeah, I'm happy for Shaq, but let's not pretend that Shaq Thompson didn't have the injuries that he had and that it really wasn't going to be something that Dan Morgan wanted to do by bringing him back. You had a rookie you had just drafted, and there's another vet who was already a scheme fit, having been with Ejiro Evero in Denver a couple years ago. Let's not rewrite history. Be happy for Shaq. It did not work out for him the last 2 years, but overall grade for this linebacker unit, I think they've been below average, so I'm going to give them a C-. Cornerbacks and safeties, the grades have not been high for at least linebackers, that second level of the defense, but the back level, I think those guys have actually looked pretty good so far this season. We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. Last but not least, let's take a look at the Panthers secondary and how they performed so far this year. I have to say this, both Mike Jackson and Jaycee Horn are having really solid seasons this year. Jaycee has a career-high 5 interceptions. Heading into the season, he only had 5 total. And a lot of it's luck. A lot of it's being in the right place, right time. You got to make your own luck in life and, of course, in this league. The guy's a ball hawk. It just hadn't happened. And let's understand, those first 3 years, he only played 22 out of possible 51 games. Last year, only missed 2 games. This year, he's only missed that 1 game with concussion. Of course, go ahead and knock on wood and not jinx him, because it's been really good to see Jaycee finally be healthy and just be the dog that he is. Like, that's the thing you knew. As a rookie, those first 3 games, oh, man, this guy's good. And then he breaks his foot. And after that, he was good that second year. Then you had the unfortunate wrist. And then after that, all the injuries that happened there, like, you knew. It wasn't a matter of ability. It was just availability with Jaycee. And once he's been available, he has shown that he is one of the best corners in the NFL. And he was, for a period of time, a week earlier this year, the highest paid DB in the history of the National Football League. And at the time, for a lot of people around the league, they probably looked around and it's like, really, Carolina? But then you watch the seasons, like, I see. And especially on Monday night, those 2 interceptions that he had on Brock Purdy, dog. So looking at him again, career high 5 interceptions. That is tied this season with the Bears' Ashawn Wright for the most among cornerbacks in the NFL. Looking at Mike Jack, he also has 3 interceptions in his own right. That makes Horn and Jackson the top duo in the NFL with 8 interceptions so far this season. Jackson that's cornerback duo because you look at Wright. And then Kevin Byard, I believe, is up in Chicago as well. Those guys would then be the top duo because I think they have like 11 combined. But that's safety and corner. Looking at cornerback duos, Mike Jackson, Jaycee Horn, 8 top in the league as far as ball hawks. Thieves Avenue, had someone hit me up in my DMs over on Twitter at Julian Council asking me, is Thieves Avenue back? Apparently, the last 3 weeks, 5 interceptions, pick 6. They may be back. Mike Jack and Jaycee are doing it. And you look at Mike, he is the highest graded corner on the team. And PFF, for whatever reason, does not like Jaycee Horn. And that's one of the things when I look at the grades, you can't tell me Mike Jackson, who's 18th highest graded corner, while Jaycee is 65th. You cannot tell me that Mike Jackson has been that much better than Jaycee so far this season. I think Jaycee's been a better player and is a better player. The way the Panthers value them is very clearly that Jaycee is the guy and Mike is another guy. He's a Jag plus for them, just a guy, but more than that. It's weird. You look at the numbers, passer rating allowed. Mike is allowed a 69.7 when targeted. Jaycee is 74.5. So looking at that mark, all right, I see. Both of them, though, they rank in the top 10 among players who have played at least 50 snaps. Those are corners who played at least 50 snaps. So two guys, again, 8 interceptions combined, both having solid passer ratings when targeted in the top 10 among corners who are actually getting burned in the league this season. That's a solid duo. And I just think back to, should the Panthers go get Jalen Ramsey? Should they go get Jair Alexander? All the questions. And I was thinking to myself, like, damn, y'all, like, you really trying to get rid of Mike Jack like that? And maybe you're looking at corner, at the nickel. Maybe you wanted to get a slot guy. I don't think either one of those guys are going to come play slot. The Panthers told y'all back on, was it March 10th? Whenever the legal negotiating period was, that, well, clearly Jaycee was not going anywhere. He already had a 5th-year option, but they love Jaycee, and they showed you later that night they like Mike Jackson too, and he was going to be their starter this year and look like he's going to be their starter again next year because he's played well yet again here in 2025. So a ton of credit to him. The one area that you do have questions about is the nickelback spot. Shaw Smith-Wade had been starting there. Then against Atlanta and against San Francisco, Corey Thornton, the undrafted free agent out of Louisville, got the starts, and he broke his leg in that game against 49ers. Shaw had to play last week because of the injury to both Corey, but also Jaycee being injured. And looking at the year so far for him, he's 61.9 PFF grade and a 62.7 coverage grade. So he's going to be out there. He has experience. I don't think there's that much concern, but they clearly felt like they had a better option, at least in those two matchups against Atlanta and against San Francisco, in Corey Thornton than they had in Shaw Smith-Wade, but he will be important for the Panthers down the stretch as well. Overall grade for this group, going to give them a B+. Safety. I'm not going to spend too much time here. Just looking at their numbers so far, PFF-wise, Tre'von Moehrig, 64.6 PFF grade, but the run defense grade, solid 74.2. And I said earlier when looking at the defensive run-stopping numbers, it's not just the interior guys, it's the corners, it's the linebackers, the edge rushers. It's especially been the safeties, as Tre'von has been right up there. 57.7 coverage grade. Not that surprising. That was the one area you looked at where you thought maybe he's not going to be that great in that area. As we've seen, the linebackers have struggled against tight ends, and also has Tre'von Moehrig. Nick Scott, been pretty solid, 62.6 grade so far this year for Carolina. Lathan Ransom, the rookie, has a 55.5 grade, so not the best, but 85.2 run defense grade, which I found interesting. But the coverage, that's been the issue, 44.4 coverage grade. Overall, I think these guys have been improved. I'm interested to see maybe Demai Richardson, who got a lot of play on Sunday because Tre'von was out due to suspension. I'm curious if maybe he gets to play a little more. That was a guy that we thought was going to have more of an impact than he's had so far this season, while we didn't think Nick Scott was going to be starting every single game this year at safety. Overall, I'm going to give these guys a B- grade for the room. But looking at the defense total, there's plenty of areas where they can clearly improve at linebacker, off the edge, even sometimes in the back end. Like, they can improve in some of these areas. It's not a perfect defense, but it has been a dramatically improved defense. Why? Because Derrick Brown is playing. And when you have an elite player like him, he makes a difference. He didn't intercept the ball on Sunday, but he got the mid on it to have that happen. He got the sack, and then DJ Wooden picked it up. He made plays that need to be made. Jaycee's made those kind of plays. Mike Jackson has made big time plays. Like we saw the pick six on Sunday. Shaw Smith-Wade pick six against Atlanta that ended that game early in the third quarter. Everybody has stepped up defensively this season. They have not always been perfect, but they have made plays when they needed them. Patrick Jones, who's out for the year, closing out that game against Miami back in week 4, for that week 5 for that comeback, was monstrous for them to have that happen. Against Dallas, getting the stops when they needed it. Against, obviously, the Rams on Sunday. I applaud what Ejiro Evero's unit has done, and I don't hear too many cause for him to lose his job. Maybe they'll come back up depending on how the season ends. But looking at the numbers, overall, they're 18th in EPA per play defensively. They're 24th in just overall defensive EPA. They're 11th in success rate, and they're 13th in explosive play percentage. This is a middle-of-the-road defense. I'll take that, especially after being historically the worst scoring defense, even though not every single one of those points is because of the defense in the history of the NFL. They've gone from being historically bad to just being fine, being good enough to be in a spot where an offense that hasn't really been that great throwing the ball much of the year, they've been able to win games because of what the defense has been able to do. And they've been able to make the right plays at the right time and play complementary football. So overall, it's an above average defense or right there around average. I'm going to give them a C+. So you got a C+ defense. I believe I said a C- yesterday. Offense. And what does that get you? Average football team. And what is that? 7-6 with an opportunity to close out the season and go to the playoffs. Will they do it? We'll find out over the next 4 weeks here on Locked On Panthers. And of course, watching wherever you are across the world. That's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe or follow the show for free over on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter and Blue Sky at Julian Council, where I'm back with y'all next Wednesday answering your weekly Wednesday mailbag questions, either at me or DM me over on Twitter to get those questions in, or over on Blue Sky as well at Julian Council. In the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding and enjoy a stress-free weekend of NFL football.